The most violent earthquakes do not shake the ground. They happen in absolute silence, right in the middle of a perfectly curated living room. You are standing there, holding a sleeping infant, staring at a space that took years of dual incomes, compromised weekends, and relentless ambition to build. And in a matter of hours, you realize that exactly half of it is gone. Not just the physical assets or the liquid cash. The entire future you bought and paid for has been violently foreclosed on. Society loves to sell the myth of the clean break. The conscious uncoupling. The civilized transition where two reasonable adults sit across a polished oak table, sign a few documents, and seamlessly pivot to a healthy co-parenting dynamic. It is a beautiful, comforting lie. When you are a high-performing professional, someone who has spent their entire adult life engineering stability, optimizing careers, and meticulously planning for a child, the reality of a split is a brutal, logistical amputation. You spent years laying the bricks for a very specific legacy. You bought the right house in the right zip code. You read the developmental psychology books. You balanced the financial spreadsheets and timed the parental leave perfectly. Yesterday, you were a unified front building an empire. Today, you are staring at a blindingly white legal document that reduces a deeply entangled human history to cold line items and ruthless percentages. Your entire identity, your carefully calculated net worth, the very structural foundation of your family, just halved overnight. You stand in the doorway of the nursery. You look at the crib you spent weeks researching for safety ratings. The expensive blackout curtains. The $529 college savings plan you started aggressively funding before the baby was even born. It was supposed to be a fortress of security. Now, as you watch your child breathe in the dim light, it feels less like a sanctuary and more like a contested asset in a hostile corporate bankruptcy. Friends and family offer well-meaning, utterly useless platitudes. They tell you that kids are resilient. They tell you that you will find a new normal. They speak in the gentle, hushed tones reserved for tragedies, completely failing to grasp the sheer operational violence of what you are actually doing. For the high earner, the ambitious new parent, the cognitive dissonance is absolutely deafening. You are accustomed to being in complete control. You are used to outworking your problems, strategizing your way out of complex crises, and executing long-term plans with flawless precision. But you cannot simply outwork the collapse of your own home. There is no strategic corporate pivot that protects you from the hollow, echoing silence when you realize the person you built this entire architecture with is now, legally and practically, your adversary. So, you compartmentalize. You mentally put blue painter's tape on the furniture and the bank accounts. This goes. That stays. Mine. Theirs. You tell yourself you are being logical, clinical, and efficient. You maintain your executive composure, swallowing the overwhelming personal devastation because the infant waking up in the next room needs a pillar of stability, not a shattered human being. You are essentially trying to rebuild an airplane while in a terrifying free fall, clutching a newborn, all while actively negotiating the market price of the parachute. You think the hardest part is signing the papers and deciding to leave. But the real nightmare is discovering the hidden price tag of the amicable split. Because the most expensive casualty of unraveling a family isn't your bank account. The spreadsheet becomes your new reality. Rows and columns meticulously designed to mathematically dismantle a life that was never meant to be quantified. On paper, it looks like a simple accounting exercise. Assets in column A, liabilities in column B. But when you are staring at the line item for your child's $529 college fund, or the joint savings account earmarked for a backyard renovation that will never happen, the numbers blur into something entirely different. You are not dividing cash. You are dividing the ghost of your future. You sit in mediation, usually in a sterile room with terrible fluorescent lighting, and you try to act like a rational executive negotiating a corporate merger. You discuss the equity in the primary residence with a flat, emotionless voice. You calculate the depreciation of the family SUV. You barter over the parenting schedules like they are high-stakes trade commodities. Thanksgiving for Christmas Eve. Spring break for the 4th of July. You nod, you take meticulous notes, and you project an aura of complete, unbothered control. But underneath that stoic veneer, a terrifying alchemy is taking place. Every single forced compromise breeds a new, silent resentment. You wanted to be the bigger person. You swore to yourself and to your child that this would not turn into one of those ugly, drawn-out legal wars that ruin families. You committed to the noble illusion of fairness. But fairness is a highly subjective metric. When two people are deeply, fundamentally wounded, nobody's version of fair will ever align. Your ex-partner's definition of an equitable split feels like an outright theft of your stability. The logistical nightmare consumes every waking moment. It becomes a second, exhausting, unpaid full-time job. You are untangling shared credit cards, deciphering who actually owns the airline miles, and realizing that the custom dining table you bought together is now a radioactive symbol of everything that failed. You find yourself fighting over trivial household items, not because you actually want the physical objects, but because you desperately need a victory. You need to reclaim some small fraction of the territory you feel violently slipping away. This is the psychological trap of the amicable split. You drain your vital emotional reserves trying to keep the peace. You agree to financial and custodial terms that slowly hollow you out, all while convincing yourself it is absolutely necessary for the psychological safety of your child. You rationalize the endless concessions. You tell yourself that the money does not matter, that you are a high earner, that you can always rebuild your wealth. But the resentment does not care about your logical rationalizations. It compounds quietly in the background, like a debt collecting interest. It builds into a physical pressure in your chest when you realize you will only wake up in the same house as your baby exactly 50% of the time. It spikes into pure, unadulterated fury when you pack a small duffel bag of toddler clothes, perfectly folding the tiny shirts, only to hand it across the threshold of a neutral drop-off zone. You are paying an exorbitant premium to dismantle your own foundation, and the sheer, unspoken injustice of it threatens to choke you. You try to be clinical, dividing the equity and the holiday schedules with mathematical precision. But there is one highly volatile asset no mediator warns you about, and losing control of it will cost you your sanity, if you don't see the trap that's being set for you right now. The alarm goes off at 5 in the morning, and the performance immediately begins. You step into the shower, letting the scalding water wash away the exhaustion of a fractured night's sleep, and you mentally armor up for the day. You are not just a parent anymore, and you are not just a professional. You are an actor playing two extraordinarily demanding roles on two completely separate stages, with zero time for an intermission. You walk into the office, and the mask snaps firmly into place. The posture straightens. The voice drops into that familiar, authoritative cadence. You lead the strategy meetings. You dissect quarterly projections. You navigate complex negotiations with the ruthless efficiency that built your career in the first place. Your colleagues look at you and see a pillar of absolute competence. They see someone who operates at the highest level of control. They do not see the custody schedule burning a hole in your briefcase, or the frantic, staccato text exchange with the family law attorney you just had in the elevator. You compartmentalize the trauma so effectively it genuinely scares you. You slice your brain into hermetically sealed compartments. The boardroom is safe. The boardroom operates on logic, strategy, and measurable outcomes. You can win in the boardroom. But then the workday ends, and the Real Marathon begins. You transition from closing deals to heating formula. The drive home is a suffocating compression chamber. You pull into the driveway of a house that feels simultaneously too large and entirely empty. You unlock the front door, and you are immediately hit by a silence that is almost violently loud. There is no partner to tag in. There is no one to take the baby, so you can just have 10 minutes to stare at a wall and decompress. You are the sole line of defense. You put on the second mask. The cheerful, unwavering, hyper-engaged parent. You sing the songs, you warm the bottles, and you rock a fussy infant while your own chest feels like it is cracking wide open under the pressure. You perform a one-person play of domestic stability for an audience who cannot even speak yet. You project absolute safety to your child, swallowing your panic, your grief, and your sheer physical exhaustion. This double life is an architectural marvel of human endurance. It is also completely unsustainable. The isolation of being this competent is profound. Because you are functioning at such a high level in both arenas, no one steps in to intervene. The world looks at your perfectly tailored clothes and your perfectly cared for baby, and they assume you are fine. They do not realize that you are running entirely on the fumes of pure adrenaline and the absolute terror of failing your child. Every night, after the crib is finally quiet, you sit alone in the dark. You stare at the glowing screen of your phone, feeling the crushing, gravitational weight of your dual existence. You are holding up the sky with one hand and rocking a cradle with the other. You can fake the executive presence in the boardroom, and you can fake the smiles for the baby. But the psychological bill for this double life is compounding daily. And when the debt finally comes due, it's going to force a drastic choice that most people are completely terrified to make. The illusion holds for weeks, maybe even months. You trade emails about legal retainers and closing costs with the sterile detachment of two diplomats negotiating a ceasefire. But eventually, the facade inevitably cracks. It almost never happens over a major, tangible asset. You do not lose your mind over the stock portfolio or the retirement accounts. The break happens over something impossibly small. A dispute over a holiday weekend schedule. A condescending text message about the baby's sleep routine. A sudden, petty demand for half the appraised value of a rocking chair you bought for the nursery. Suddenly, the sterile boardroom negotiation detonates into a scorched earth campaign. This is the hostile pivot. It is the exact moment you realize that your former partner is no longer looking at you as a co-parent. They are looking at you as a liability that must be aggressively mitigated. Every conversation becomes a trap, a calculated maneuver designed to establish a legal precedent. The person who once anchored your entire world, who knows your deepest vulnerabilities and insecurities, is now meticulously weaponizing them to secure a strategic advantage in a custody arrangement. You feel a cold, blinding anger that defies all of your executive training. It is not a loud, screaming rage. It is a quiet, terrifying hypervigilance. You realize that your child's future, their access to resources, their emotional baseline, their daily routine, is tethered to someone who is actively trying to dismantle your leverage. Fear is a potent accelerant. When combined with heartbreak, it turns negotiations shockingly petty. The family law system is a massive industrial machine that runs entirely on this specific brand of fear, and you are now caught in its gears. You find yourself trapped in an absurd, expensive loop, paying an attorney a premium hourly rate to litigate the fate of a crib mattress or a high-end stroller. You are bleeding capital, both financial and psychological, just to prevent the other side from scoring a perceived victory. You justify the warfare because you feel backed into a corner. You tell yourself you are defending your child's standard of living. You are fighting to build a firewall around the life you promised them. But this is the ultimate, devastating trap of the untangling process. The resentment metastasizes, completely poisoning the foundation of the new reality you are desperately trying to establish. You become so consumed with defending your territory that you allow the wreckage of your dead relationship to dictate your daily operations. You are spending your most valuable, finite resources, your cognitive bandwidth, your emotional availability, your executive function, relitigating a past that simply no longer exists. The hostility becomes a heavy, suffocating atmosphere that you carry into every room. It leaches the joy from the precious, limited hours you have with your baby. You are physically sitting on the floor, stacking wooden blocks, but mentally, you are locked in combat, drafting a scathing rebuttal to an inflammatory email. The battle becomes all-consuming, erasing the very person you were trying to protect in the first place. The anger breaks you down until there is absolutely nothing left. But hitting zero is exactly what you need. Because the only way out of this toxic cycle isn't closure, and it certainly isn't forgiveness, it's a completely ruthless, mechanical strategy that almost no one has the courage to execute. The strategy is radical acceptance, executed with the cold, unfeeling precision of a corporate restructuring. You must stop trying to win the separation. Winning is an emotional concept rooted entirely in the past, and you can no longer afford to invest a single additional ounce of your cognitive capital into a bankrupt enterprise. You are going to start treating your former partner not as a bitter enemy to be defeated, but as an external, uncontrollable variable to be managed. Like a sudden spike in inflation. Like a shifting macroeconomic condition. You do not argue with market conditions. You do not write them angry emails. You adapt your daily operations to permanently neutralize their impact. This requires an absolute, ruthless severing of the emotional supply line. You stop drafting multi-paragraph defenses of your character. You reduce every single communication to a clinical, binary exchange of logistical facts regarding the infant. Yes. No. The drop-off is at 5. You offer 0 explanations and demand 0 apologies. You strip all the oxygen from the conflict, systematically starving the resentment until it simply collapses under its own irrelevance. This is not about achieving some enlightened state of forgiveness. Forgiveness is a luxury you do not currently have the time for. This is strictly about operational efficiency and reclaiming your sanity. Once you neutralize the external drain on your energy, you turn inward and begin the actual architecture of reconstruction. You stop mourning the halved net worth, the lost equity, and the curated real estate. That capital is gone, and grieving it only delays your recovery. You are now the sole architect of a new, sovereign entity. You audit your remaining assets with complete objectivity. You consolidate your focus. You build a new, impenetrable financial model that relies entirely on your own earning power, insulated forever from the chaos of shared accounts and conditional stability. You quickly realize that true leverage is not having the larger house or the better vacation schedule. True leverage is possessing an unshakable peace of mind that no one can ever legally petition for. You design an entirely new legacy for your child. It will not look like the pristine, dual-income blueprint you originally drafted. It will be something infinitely stronger. You create an environment where your child experiences absolute, predictable calm the moment they cross into your jurisdiction. You do not overcompensate for the split with extravagant gifts or frantic, manufactured joy. You simply offer them the quiet, steady presence of a parent who has completely mastered their own internal environment. You teach them resilience not through empty platitudes, but through the silent, undeniable observation of your own survival. The transition is brutal, but the clarity that follows the destruction is profound. The massive volume of energy you used to burn just trying to hold a fractured life together is suddenly redirected into your own autonomous growth. You finally start sleeping through the night. The sharp, suffocating panic in your chest is replaced by a cold, quiet, undeniable strength. You realize that the absolute worst-case scenario has already happened, and it did not break you. It simply cleared the board. You will survive the untangling, and you will rebuild the foundation. But once the dust settles and you finally stand alone in the quiet of your new life, you have to face the most terrifying, exhilarating question of all: now that the space is entirely yours, who are you going to become?